Hey there, friends. Welcome back to our channel, where we bring you stories that grip your heart and keep you hooked. Today we're diving into The Kidnapped Boy and the False Preacher, a tale of trust, betrayal, and a small town's fight for justice. It's packed with emotion and twists that'll leave you speechless. So grab a snack, hit that like button, and let's jump into this incredible story. Summer 2025 bathed Willow Creek, Montana, in a warm, golden glow. Tucked between rolling hills and endless wheat fields, the town was small enough that everyone knew your name. Main Street hummed with life. Farmers haggling at the feed store, kids zipping by on bikes, and the cheerful jingle of bells at Miller's General Store, where David and Sarah Miller sold flour, fishing lures, and just about everything else. Their son Tommy, a scrappy 10-year-old with messy brown hair, was a local star, always tossing a baseball or scratching a stray dog's ears. At the edge of town stood St. Mary's, an old church with a crooked steeple and peeling paint. Its pews sat mostly empty, but folks still wandered in to light candles or whisper prayers, the quiet a balm in a busy world. Tommy loved the place, slipping in after school with a small candle. Kneeling by the altar, he'd pray for his dog, Rusty, who died last spring. "Hope you're fetching sticks in heaven," he'd murmur, his voice bouncing off the wooden beams. The miller's life was simple but full. David, broad-shouldered with a booming laugh, kept the store running, swapping weather talk with customers. Sarah, with her warm smile and flour-dusted aprons, sneaked kids free cookies, her pies a town legend. Tommy was their heart, a fifth grader dreaming of playing shortstop for the Yankees. They'd cheer at his Little League games, their pickup truck parked by the diamond, country music drifting from the radio. A new face arrived that June, stirring the town's rhythm. A preacher calling himself Father Michael showed up at St. Mary's, his black shirt crisp, a silver cross glinting at his neck. Tall and lean, with graying hair and a voice smooth as honey, he won folks over fast. "Here to serve God's people," he said at the town picnic, handing out lemonade. Widows baked him casseroles, farmers clapped his back, and kids trailed him, drawn to his kind eyes. He fixed the church's leaky roof and led prayers, his words wrapping the town in comfort. Nobody guessed Father Michael was Victor Kane, a crook fresh out of prison. He'd robbed banks in Idaho years ago, his mugshot long forgotten, paroled. And penniless, Victor had drifted to Willow Creek, a nowhere town perfect for hiding. Swiping a preacher's outfit from a thrift shop, he'd built a lie, his past buried deep. St. Mary's, with its dusty collection plates and empty rooms, was a safe haven. He needed cash to keep moving, and Willow Creek's open hearts were ripe for the picking. Tommy crossed paths with Father Michael one sticky afternoon, pedaling to St. Mary's, his baseball glove dangling from his handlebars. He ducked inside, the cool air washing over him. Lighting his candle, he knelt, whispering, to Rusty. Footsteps creaked, and Father Michael appeared, his shadow stretching across the pews. "Praying for someone special, son?" he asked, his voice soft. Tommy nodded, shy but open. "My dog, he's gone." The preacher crouched beside him, his cross catching the light. "That's a good prayer. Heaven's listening." Tommy smiled, warmed by the words, blind to the chill in Victor's gaze. Victor saw a chance in Tommy. The miller's store was doing well, their new pickup a sign of money tucked away. A kid like Tommy could bring a ransom, enough to fuel Victor's next getaway. He started watching the boy, tracking his habits, school, practice, the church. Over pie at the diner, he'd charm locals, fishing for gossip about the Millers. Finances, his preacher act airtight. "Solid folks, those Millers," he'd say, sipping coffee while scheming in the dark. Willow Creek rolled on, unaware. Saturday markets filled the square with stalls of jam and fresh peaches. Tommy played catch in the park, his laughter echoing, while David and Sarah worked the store, their lives woven into the town's heartbeat. Sheriff Linda Hayes, a sharp-eyed woman who'd kept the peace for years, cruised Main Street, her radio. Buzzing with small-time calls, she'd wave to Father Michael at church, his sermons about hope ringing true. "Glad you're here," she'd say, no hint of doubt in her mind. But Victor's world was shrinking. His stolen cash from a gas station holdup was gone, and the church's collection plate barely covered gas. Late at night, in St. Mary's back room, he'd count coins, his jaw tight, desperation creeping in. Tommy's visits to the church became a routine the boys' trust, a tool Victor could twist. He'd hand Tommy a soda, ask about his parents, each question a step in his plan. "Your folks must be proud," he'd say, his smile masking a predator's hunger. One evening, Tommy stayed late at St. Mary's, his candle flickering low. Victor leaned close, his voice warm. "You're a good kid, Tommy. Need anything?" "I'm here." Tommy nodded, his guard down, the preacher's kindness a soft glow. Outside, the town settled, crickets humming under a starry sky, its peace hanging by a thread. Sheriff Hayes, wrapping up her patrol, drove past St. Mary's, the church's windows dark. Her radio crackled, but a nagging feeling stirred. Something. About the new preacher, too slick for Willow Creek? She'd check his background tomorrow, just to be safe. For now, the town slept, its quiet masking a storm brewing in the shadows. The stars over Willow Creek twinkled, casting a soft glow in St. Mary's weathered steeple. Inside, Tommy's candle had burned out, its wax pooling on the altar. Victor Kane, hiding behind Father Michael's smile, locked the church doors, his mind racing. Tommy's trust was a golden ticket, a kid who'd walk right into a trap. Outside, Sheriff Hayes' cruiser rolled by, her headlights sweeping the empty lot. Her hunch about the preacher lingered, a pebble in her shoe, but Willow Creek slept on, its peace a fragile bubble. Morning brought a bustle to Main Street. Farmers' market stalls lined the square, piled with tomatoes and homemade jam. Kids darted through the crowd, their laughter mixing with the twang of a busker's guitar. At Miller's General Store, David stacked canned goods, his easy grin, greeting customers while Sarah rang up purchases, her apron tied tight. Tommy, fresh from breakfast, grabbed his baseball glove and pedaled off, promising to be back for lunch. "Don't be late," Sarah called, her voice warm but firm. He waved, his bike wobbling, already dreaming of strikeouts. St. Mary's was Tommy's first stop, a habit now. The church's cool air washed over him as he slipped inside, his sneakers squeaking on the floor. Lighting a candle, he knelt, whispering to Rusty, his dog's memory a quiet comfort. Victor appeared, his cross necklace glinting, his voice smooth. "Back again, Tommy? You're a faithful one." Tommy grinned, shy but proud. Rusty deserves it. Victor nodded, crouching close, his eyes scanning the boy like a wolf sizing up prey. "Good heart, son. Want a soda? Got some in the back?" Tommy followed, unsuspecting, to the church's small office, its shelves stuffed with hymnals. Victor handed him a can, the fizz loud in the quiet. They chatted. Baseball, school, the Miller's store. Victor leaned in, casual but calculated. "Your folks doing all right? Store's busy, huh?" Tommy nodded, sipping his drink. "Dad says we're saving for a new truck." Victor's smile tightened, his plan clicking into place. A family with savings meant a ransom could work, and Tommy was the perfect pawn. Back at the store, Sarah glanced at the clock, her brow furrowing. Tommy was usually back by now, his appetite like a timer. David, unloading crates, caught her look. "He's probably at the park," he said, but a flicker of worry passed between them. Willow Creek. Felt safe, but parents never stopped watching. Sarah texted Tommy, "Lunch soon, kiddo. Where you at?" No reply came, her phone silent on the counter. Victor's days were a balancing act. By morning, he'd preach at St. Mary's, his sermons about kindness, drawing nods from the sparse congregation. Afternoons, he'd stroll Main Street, shaking. Hands, his preacher act polished. "Bless you," he'd say, while pocketing loose change from the church's collection plate. At night, in the church's back room, he'd map his scheme, his burner phone ready for the ransom call. Tommy's visits were clockwork, each one a step closer to cash. He'd need a place to hide the boy, a shack in the woods behind the church. Overgrown and forgotten, Sheriff Hayes, meanwhile, couldn't shake her gut feeling. At the station, a squat building by the highway, she pulled Father Michael's name through the system. Nothing popped. No record. No red flags. "Too clean," she muttered, her coffee going cold. Newcomers in Willow Creek usually had a trail. Old. Jobs, family ties. She called a friend in Boise, a state trooper, asking for a deeper check. "Look for a Victor Kane," she said, recalling a bank robber from years back. Just a hunch. The trooper promised to dig, but it'd take time. Tommy's world was all sunshine. After St. Mary's, he'd hit the park, tossing a ball with his buddy Nate, their gloves smacking. "Gonna be a pro," Nate teased, lobbing a high one. Tommy laughed, diving for the catch, his mind far from danger. Victor watched from a distance, leaning on a fence, his preacher smile fixed. The boy's routine was predictable, his trust absolute. A plan formed: lure Tommy to the church, knock him out, hide him in the shack. The ransom would be quick, clean, and untraceable. The town's rhythm held steady. Saturday brought a Little League game, Tommy's team in blue jerseys, parents cheering from folding chairs. David and Sarah clapped, their worries eased by Tommy's grin as he stole a base. "That's my boy," David shouted, his arm around Sarah. After they grabbed burgers at the diner, Tommy chattering about the game. Father Michael stopped by their table, his voice warm. "Fine swing, Tommy. You're a star." Sarah smiled, grateful. "Thanks, Father." Victor nodded, his eyes lingering on Tommy, his plan a heartbeat away. Victor's nights grew restless. In the shack he stashed supplies: rope, a blanket, a jug of water. He tested a bottle of liquid from his old life, a sedative strong enough to drop a kid for hours. "Just enough," he muttered, tucking it in his coat. The ransom note was ready, scrawled on cheap paper. 50,000 or the boy's gone. He'd call from the burner phone, demand cash in a bag, and leave it by the old mill. Willow Creek's trust was his shield. No one would suspect a preacher. Sarah's unease returned as days passed. Tommy's trips to St. Mary's felt longer, his phone often unanswered. "He's growing up," David said, but Sarah shook her head. Something's off. She'd drive by the church, peering through its windows, seeing only shadows. At the store, she'd watch Tommy bike off, her heart tight. "Be careful," she'd call, her voice lost in the wind. Sheriff Hayes got a call from Boise late one evening, her friend's voice low. "Victor Kane, bank robber paroled 6 months ago, last seen in Idaho, might have skipped state. Could be your guy." Linda's pulse quickened, her hunch solidifying. She pulled St. Mary's records, noting Father Michael's arrival matched Kane's parole. "Got you," she whispered, planning to watch him closer. The town's cameras, installed after a rash of petty thefts, covered Main Street and back roads. If Kane moved, she'd see. Tommy, oblivious, pedaled to St. Mary's on a warm afternoon, his candle in his backpack. Victor greeted him, his smile wide, his hand heavy on the boy's shoulder. "Got something special today," he said, leading Tommy inside. The church doors creaked shut, the air thick with secrets, as Willow Creek's quiet days teetered on the edge of chaos. The heavy doors of St. Mary's creaked shut, sealing Tommy inside with Victor Kane, who wore Father Michael's mask like a second skin. Afternoon light filtered through dusty, stained-glass windows, casting colored patches on the pews. Tommy clutched his candle, his baseball cap tilted, unaware of the danger closing in. Victor's smile was warm, his voice smooth as he led the boy to the church's back office. "Got a surprise for you, Tommy," he said, his hand light on the boy's shoulder. "Something special for a good kid?" Tommy grinned, his trust absolute, the air thick with a secret only Victor knew. In the cramped office, hymnals teetered on shelves, and a single bulb buzzed overhead. Victor handed Tommy a glass of water, the liquid laced with a sedative from his criminal days. "Drink up," he said, leaning against the desk, his eyes sharp. Tommy sipped, wrinkling his nose at the odd taste, but said nothing, too polite to question a preacher. They talked about baseball, Tommy chattering about his last game, his words slowing as the drug took hold. His eyelids drooped, the glass slipping from his hand, clinking on the floor. Victor caught him as he slumped, his plan snapping into motion. Outside, Willow Creek carried on, the farmer's market wrapping up, stalls folding under a pink sunset. At Miller's general store, Sarah checked her phone again, Tommy's silence gnawing at her. "He's never this late," she said, her voice tight. David, wiping down the counter, tried to stay calm. Maybe he's with Nate, lost track of time. But he grabbed his keys, the pickup's engine rumbling as they drove to the park, then St. Mary's, finding only Tommy's bike propped against the church wall. Sarah's heart raced, her calls to Tommy's phone going straight to voicemail. Victor's worked fast. Scooping Tommy up, he slipped out the church's back door, the boy's limp form hidden under a blanket. A dirt path led to a shack in the woods, its boards warped, vines choking the walls. Inside, the air was musty, a single lantern casting shadows. Victor tied Tommy's hands with rope, gentle enough to avoid marks, and laid him on a blanket. The boy's breathing was steady, his face peaceful, the sedative keeping him under. Victor checked his burner phone, ready to make the call that'd change everything. At the store, panic set in. Sarah's hands shook as she dialed Sheriff Linda Hayes, her voice breaking. "Tommy's gone. His bike's at the church, but he's not there." David paced, his jaw tight, picturing Tommy's grin at yesterday's game. Linda at the station grabbed her notepad, her voice calm but urgent. "Stay put. I'm on my way." She sped to St. Mary's, her cruiser's lights flashing, her mind flashing to Victor Kane. The preacher's clean record felt wrong, and Tommy's disappearance was too sudden for a safe town like Willow Creek. Victor dialed the Miller's store from the shack, his voice disguised with a cheap voice changer. $50,000, he growled when David answered. "Cash. By tomorrow, or the boy's gone. No cops." David's breath caught, Sarah gasping beside him. "Please don't hurt him," she begged, tears streaming. Victor hung up, tossing the phone aside, his pulse steady. He'd stashed a duffel bag for the cash drop, an old mill by the river, far from prying eyes. Slipping back to St. Mary's, he resumed his preacher act, lighting candles like nothing had happened. Sheriff Hayes arrived at the church, finding David and Sarah outside, their faces pale. "We'll find him," she promised, her hand on Sarah's arm. Inside, St. Mary's was empty, Father Michael nowhere in sight. Linda's eyes narrowed, spotting Tommy's candle, wax still soft. She called for backup, her deputy scouring the woods while she headed to the station to pull camera footage. Willow Creek security cameras, installed after last year's thefts, covered Main Street, back roads, and even the church's lot. If Tommy had left, they'd see it. The Millers returned home, their cozy house feeling hollow. Sarah clutched Tommy's baseball glove, its leather worn, her sobs shaking the room. David held her, his voice hoarse. "We'll pay, whatever it takes." They scraped together savings, cash from the store, a loan from Sarah's sister, praying it'd be enough. But Linda had warned them, "Tell me everything. We'll handle this quietly." Against Victor's threats, they confessed the ransom call, trusting Linda's steady gaze. At the station, Linda hunched over a monitor, scrolling through grainy footage. A camera by St. Mary's caught it, Father Michael, blanket in hand, slipping out the back door, a small shape in his arms. Another clip showed him heading toward the woods, his face clear under a streetlight. "Got you," Linda whispered, her hunch confirmed. She cross-checked Victor's alias with the Boise tip. Victor. Kane bank robber, parole violator. The pieces fit, but Tommy's safety came first. She'd keep quiet, let Victor think he'd won. Willow Creek rallied, unaware of the truth. Neighbors organized a search combing fields and riverbanks, their flashlights bobbing in the dark. The diner, folks whispered, praying for Tommy's return. Victor joined them, his preacher act flawless, leading a prayer circle. "We'll bring him home," he said, his voice heavy with false sorrow. Sarah, red-eyed, thanked him, blind to his lie. David's fists clenched, his trust in the town fraying, but he nodded, playing along. Linda's plan took shape. She stationed an unmarked car near the church, tracking Victor's moves. A deputy scouted the woods, spotting the shack's faint lantern glow. "Kid's there," the deputy radioed, voice low. Linda nodded, her jaw set. They'd wait for Victor's next move, the ransom drop, before closing in. Confronting him now risked Tommy's life, and she wouldn't take that chance. Back at the shack, Tommy stirred, his head foggy, the ropes biting his wrists. Moonlight leaked through a cracked window, the woods silent. "Mom," he mumbled, his voice weak, fear creeping in. Victor was gone, back at St. Mary's, but the shack's walls felt like a cage. Tommy tugged at the ropes, his heart pounding, his prayers for Rusty, now pleas for home. The Millers sat by their phone, the ransom bag packed, their hope pinned on Linda's promise. David stared out the window, the town's lights dim, while Sarah clutched Tommy's glove, whispering, "We're coming, baby." Willow Creek held its breath, the truth buried in shadows, as Victor's plan and Linda's trap rushed toward a breaking point. Dawn broke over Willow Creek, painting the hills in soft pinks, but a shadow hung over the town. In the shack behind St. Mary's, Tommy curled on a rough blanket, his wrists raw from the ropes, his mind clouded from the sedatives lingering. Grip. The lantern had gone out, leaving the shack dim, its walls creaking in the morning breeze. He tugged at his bonds, whispering, "Mom, Dad, I'm here." The woods outside were quiet, too far from home, and fear tightened his chest, but he clung to thoughts of his parents' voices. At the Miller's house, the night had been sleepless. Sarah sat at the kitchen table, clutching Tommy's baseball glove, its leather worn smooth, her eyes swollen from crying. David paced, the ransom bag, $50,000 in cash, by the door, its presence a heavy weight. "We should have watched him." "Closer," Sarah said, her voice cracking. David stopped, his hand on her shoulder. "We'll bring him home. Linda won't let us down." They trusted Sheriff Hayes, but the silence was torture, each second stretching like hours. Victor Kane, cloaked as Father Michael, wove through Willow Creek like a ghost. By morning, he stood at St. Mary's altar, leading a prayer for Tommy's return, his voice warm, his cross necklace catching the light. "We must trust in hope," he said, as townsfolk nodded, their faith in him solid. Widows squeezed his arm, kids left notes for Tommy, and Victor played the part, his preacher mask hiding a predator's heart. At the diner, he sipped coffee, listening to whispers about the search, his secret buried deep. Sheriff Linda Hayes moved in the shadows, her station a hub of quiet planning. The camera footage was damning. Victor carrying Tommy to the shack, his face clear under moonlight. She'd briefed her deputy, Tom, a wiry man with quick instincts, and they'd scouted the woods. "Kid still there?" Tom said, pointing to a clip of Victor leaving the shack empty-handed. Linda's eyes narrowed. "We wait for the ransom drop, then we move." She'd posted 2 plainclothes officers near the old mill, the drop site, their radios off to keep Victor in the dark. The Millers followed Victor's demands, their hearts pounding. At noon, David drove to the mill, its rusted silos looming by the river. He dropped the bag behind a pile of crates, his hands trembling. "Hang on, Tommy," he muttered, climbing back into the pickup. Sarah stayed home, her phone in her grip, praying for Linda's call. They'd kept the ransom secret, letting the town search parties scour fields, unaware of the deal. Victor watched from a hill, his burner phone pinging with a text he'd sent himself. Bags in place. Slipping out of St. Mary's, claiming a sick visit, he hiked to the mill, his boots kicking up dust. The bag was there, heavy with cash, a ticket to his next hideout. He slung it over his shoulder, his pulse quick, and trekked back to the shack, planning to move Tommy to the church's basement. He'd find the boy soon, play the savior, and slip away before anyone looked twice. Linda's team was steps. Ahead, a camera at the mill caught Victor grabbing the bag, his figure sharp in the lens. "He's on the move, son," Tom radioed, tailing him in an unmarked truck, blending with farm rigs. Linda watched from the station, her monitors flickering, tracking Victor to the woods. A hidden camera on a back road showed him entering the shack. "Kid's alive," an officer whispered, spotting Tommy through a slat, tied but stirring. Linda's voice cut through the radio. "Hold tight, we strike when he moves the boy." Willow Creek's search grew frantic. Neighbors tacked up flyers with Tommy's photo, their voices hoarse from calling his name. At the community center, folks dropped off casseroles for the Millers, their prayers a steady hum. "He's out there," one said, clutching a candle. Victor joined them, his face grave, offering blessings. "God will guide us," he said, shaking hands, while Sarah, hollow-eyed, thanked him, her trust in him a painful irony. David stood close, his fists tight, his faith in the town fraying. Tommy fought back in small ways. In the shack, he'd found a loose nail, its edge sharp, and sawed at the ropes when Victor was gone. "I'm not giving up," he mumbled, his hands shaky but determined. Footsteps crunched outside, Victor's boots, and Tommy froze, tucking the nail under the blanket, his heart racing. Victor checked him, his voice low. "Not long now, kid." He left again, the shack's door creaking shut, giving Tommy another chance to work the ropes, his hope, a flickering flame. The Millers waited by their phone, the ransom bag gone, their savings with it. Sarah rocked in her chair, whispering Tommy's name while David stared at the door, willing it to open with their son. Linda had called, her voice steady. "We're close. Stay strong." They clung to her words, their love for Tommy a lifeline in the dark. Linda tightened her net. She'd confirmed Victor's identity, Victor Kane, parole jumper, bank robber. The shack was under watch, her team ready to move. "He'll shift the kid soon," she told Tom, her eyes on the screen. "That's our window." The town's cameras, a quiet guardian, had caught every step. Victor's trips to the shack, the mill, the church. He thought he'd outsmarted Willow Creek, but the truth was closing in, a noose he couldn't see. Victor, back at St. Mary's, prepared his final act. He'd move Tommy tonight, stage a rescue, and leave town with the cash. Lighting a candle, he rehearsed his story, finding the boy behind the church, calling the sheriff, tears in his eyes. "Perfect," he muttered, his smile cold. The town's trust was his armor, but Willow Creek's eyes were open, its cameras unblinking, ready to shatter his lie. Twilight draped Willow Creek in a soft purple glow, the town's lights flickering like stars against the darkening hills. In the shack behind St. Mary's, Tommy gripped the nail he'd found, its edge biting into his palm as he sawed at the shop. Ropes. His wrists burned, but the fibers were fraying, each scrape a step closer to freedom. "I'm coming home," he whispered, his voice hoarse, picturing his mom's smile, his dad's bear hugs. The woods outside were silent, but the shack's walls felt alive, watching, as Victor's plan neared its peak. At St. Mary's, Victor Kane polished his Father Michael act, lighting candles with a steady hand, his duffel bag of ransom cash hidden in the church's basement. He'd move Tommy tonight, stash him behind the church, and find him by morning, tears ready for the townsfolk. "Perfect," he muttered, checking his burner phone, its screen glowing in the dim nave. The town's trust was his shield, and the $50,000 was his escape. Mexico, maybe, or Canada. He slipped into the night, his boots quiet, heading for the shack. Sheriff Linda Hayes was one step ahead. At the station, her team huddled around monitors, the cameras painting Victor's every move. A back road feed showed him leaving St. Mary's, his figure cutting through the dusk. "He's going for the kid," Linda said, her voice low, her eyes locked on the screen. Deputy Tom nodded, his radio crackling as he relayed orders to the plainclothes officers near the shack. We move when he's got the boy in the open, Linda instructed. No mistakes. Tommy's life hung on their timing, and she wouldn't falter. The Miller's house was a tomb of worry. Sarah rocked in a chair, Tommy's baseball glove pressed to her chest, her prayers a steady murmur. David sat by the phone, his hands clasped. The empty space where the ransom bag had been a gaping wound. "Linda's got eyes on him," he said, his voice thin, clinging to the sheriff's last call. Sarah nodded, her eyes distant. "He's scared, David. I can feel it." They held each other, their love for Tommy a flickering light in the dark. Willow Creek's search pressed on, unaware of the truth. Neighbors swept through fields, their flashlights bobbing, calling Tommy's name. At the community center, a prayer vigil grew, candles glowing, voices soft with hope. "He's coming home," one woman said, her hands clasped. Victor had stopped by earlier, his preacher mask flawless, leading a hymn. "Faith will guide us," he'd said, while folks nodded, blind to his lie. The town's warmth was his. Cover. But its cameras were his undoing. In the shack, Tommy's nail snapped a rope fiber, his heart leaping. One wrist was nearly free, the rope loose enough to slip a hand through. He froze as footsteps crunched outside. Victor, his shadow, filling the doorway. "Time to move, kid," Victor said, his voice sharp, cutting Tommy's ropes with a pocket knife. Tommy played limp, his eyes half closed, hiding his progress. Victor hoisted him over his shoulder, the boy's weight light, and stepped into the woods aiming for the church's back lot. Linda's team tightened their circle. A camera caught Victor crossing a clearing, Tommy in his arms, the shack left behind. "Now," Linda radioed, her voice steady. Tom and two officers crept through the trees, their steps silent, radios off. They'd grab Victor before he reached the church, away from prying eyes. A third officer watched the shack, ensuring no surprises. The town's cameras, small but sharp, fed every angle to Linda's screens, Victor's every step a nail in his own trap. Tommy's mind raced, his free hand twitching under the blanket Victor had draped over him. The nail was still in his pocket, a secret weapon if he needed it. He felt Victor's stride slow near the church, the steeple's shadow looming. "Almost there," Victor muttered, setting Tommy down behind a stack of crates by St. Mary's back wall. Tommy stayed still, his breath shallow, waiting for a chance. Victor stepped away, checking his phone, planning his hero act for dawn. The Millers got a call from Linda, her voice a lifeline. "We're close," she said, keeping it brief. "Stay put," Sarah gasped, her hand on David's. "He's alive?" David asked, his voice breaking. Linda paused. "We're bringing him home." They sat frozen, hope and fear colliding, their kitchen clock ticking louder than ever. Sarah whispered Tommy's name, her fingers tracing his glove, willing him to feel their love. Willow Creek's vigil grew, the community center packed. Folks shared stories of Tommy, his home runs, his grin at the store. "He's a fighter," one said, passing out candles. Victor's absence went unnoticed, his earlier prayers enough to keep his halo intact. At the diner, talk turned to the search, theories swirling, but no one pointed to the preacher, his lie still holding. Linda's team closed in. Tom signaled from the trees, his eyes on Victor, who lingered by the crates, texting on his burner. "Mom, phone." "On my mark," Linda whispered over the radio, her monitor showing Victor's back to the church. Tommy, hidden under the blanket, slipped his hand free, the rope falling silently. His heart pounded, sensing a shift, but he stayed still, trusting his instincts to wait. Victor turned, ready to head back to St. Mary's, his plan nearly complete. He'd call the sheriff soon, claim he'd found Tommy, and bask in the town's gratitude before vanishing with the cash. "Easy," he muttered, pocketing his phone. The night was quiet, the town asleep, but Willow Creek's eyes, its cameras, its sheriff, were wide open, their traps seconds from springing. Tommy felt a breeze, the blanket shifting, his free hand gripping the nail. He heard a rustle, soft, not Victor's boots, and hope flared. Someone was out there, watching, waiting. He stayed still, his breath steady, ready to run if the chance came. The church's shadow stretched over him, Willow Creek's heart, beating in the dark as Victor's lie teetered on the edge of collapse. The night air in Willow Creek was crisp, the shadow of St. Mary's steeple stretching over the crates where Tommy lay, his hand free, the nail clutched tight. His heart thumped, sensing the rustle in the trees wasn't just wind. Under the blanket, he stayed still, his breath shallow, hope sparking like a match. Victor Kane, steps away, pocketed his burner phone, his preacher's mask ready for its final act. He'd call the sheriff soon, claim he'd found the boy, and bask in Willow Creek's gratitude before slipping away with the ransom cash. The town's trust was his, but its cameras had other plans. Sheriff Linda Hayes's team moved like ghosts. Deputy Tom crouched in the brush, his eyes locked on Victor, the preacher's silhouette sharp against the church's wall. 2 plainclothes. Officers flanked him, their radios silent, waiting for Linda's signal. At the station, Linda watched the live feed, a camera hidden by the church catching every move. "Now," she whispered into her radio, her voice steady. Tom sprang, his boots soft on the grass, closing the gap as Victor turned, his hand reaching. For the crates, Tommy heard the scuffle, a muffled grunt, and peeked from under the blanket. Shadows wrestled, Victor's lanky frame against Tom's solid build. "You're done, Kane," Tom growled, pinning Victor's arms, cuffs clicking tight. The officers rushed in, one grabbing Victor's phone, the other scanning the crates. "Kid's here," one called, spotting Tommy's blanket. Tommy sat up, his voice shaky. "I'm okay." The officer knelt, cutting the last rope, his voice gentle. "You're safe now, son." Tommy's eyes stung, relief flooding him. The nail slipping from his hand, Victor thrashed, his preacher act crumbling. "You got the wrong guy," he shouted, but Tom held firm, dragging him toward a waiting cruiser. Linda arrived, her cruiser's lights off, her face hard. "Victor Kane, you're under arrest for kidnapping, extortion, and parole violation." She nodded to the officers. "Get him to the station." Victor's eyes darted, searching for an out, but Willow Creek's cameras had sealed his fate, their silent gaze exposing every lie. At the Miller's house, the phone rang, shattering the silence. Sarah lunged for it, her hands trembling. "We've got Tommy," Linda said, her voice warm. "He's safe, headed to the hospital to get checked." Sarah sobbed, collapsing into David's arms. "He's coming home," David whispered, his voice thick, tears streaming. They grabbed their coats, the pickup's tires squealing as they raced to Willow Creek General, their hearts pounding with hope. The town stirred, news spreading like wildfire. At the community center, the prayer vigil paused as phones buzzed, folks gasping, hugging. "Tommy's found," one shouted, candles flickering brighter. The diner's neon sign glowed as locals gathered, swapping rumors. "Father Michael." "Did this?" one asked, disbelief heavy. The truth hadn't hit yet, but whispers of the preacher's betrayal crept through Willow Creek, its trust shaken. At the hospital, Tommy sat on a bed, a nurse checking his wrists, their redness fading. He was tired but alert, his baseball cap back on, a juice box in hand. "I knew you'd come," he told Linda, his voice small but sure. Linda smiled, ruffling his hair. "You're a tough kid, Tommy." She stepped aside as David and Sarah burst in, their arms wrapping him tight. "We're here, baby," Sarah said, kissing his forehead, her tears mixing with his. David held them both, his voice rough. "Never letting you go." Victor sat in a holding cell, his cross necklace gone, his lies stripped bare. Linda faced him through the bars, her notepad open. "Cameras caught everything," she said, her voice cold. "The shack, the mill, the boy. Start talking." Victor slumped, his defiance fading, knowing the footage was ironclad. "I needed the money," he muttered, his bank robber past spilling out. Linda scribbled, her mind on the families he'd hurt, her resolve to close this case unshaken. Willow Creek reeled, the community center now a hub of shock. Neighbors pieced together Victor's act, his sermons, his handshakes, all a front. "He prayed with us," one said, voice trembling. The search parties disbanded, their flashlights dim, but the town's spirit held. They'd bring meals to the Millers, rebuild what Victor had broken. St. Mary's stood quiet, its doors locked, the altar empty, waiting for a new shepherd. Tommy, cleared by the doctor, went home, his room a haven of posters and baseball cards. Sarah tucked him in, her hand lingering on his. "You're so brave," she whispered, her eyes wet. Tommy managed a smile, his voice soft. "I used the nail like you taught me to fix things." David chuckled, sitting by the bed. "That's my boy." They stayed close, the house warm again, their family whole but scarred. Linda worked late, her desk piled with reports. The cameras had been key, their footage a map of Victor's crimes. She'd found the ransom cash in St. Mary's basement, every dollar accounted for. "He thought we were blind," she told Tom, sipping coffee. "Town's too smart for that." They'd charge Victor with everything: kidnapping, extortion, fraud, his parole violation ensuring years behind bars. But Linda's mind was on Tommy, his courage alight in the case. The Millers faced a new day, their porch light burning. Neighbors stopped by, leaving pies and notes, their support a blanket over the pain. "We're with you," one said, hugging. "Sarah." David nodded, his arm around Tommy, who clutched his glove, ready for practice soon. The town's cameras, once just theft deterrents, were heroes now, their lenses a quiet guard. Victor's cell was cold, his preacher days a memory. He'd face court soon, the evidence overwhelming, Willow Creek's eyes unblinking. Linda visited St. Mary's, the church's silence heavy. "We'll heal," she murmured, lighting a candle for Tommy, her town's strength, her anchor. Tommy slept, his dreams of baseball, not shacks. He'd told Linda about Victor's tricks, the soda, the kind words, and she'd listened, her notepad filling. The town buzzed with questions, the truth about Father Michael spreading, its faith tested, but not broken. Willow Creek stood ready to mend, its heart beating strong as Victor's lies faced their final reckoning. Morning sunlight spilled over Willow Creek, warming the hills and casting long shadows from St. Mary's empty steeple. The town buzzed with a mix of relief and shock, Tommy's rescue a miracle, Father Michael's betrayal a wound. At the Millers' house, Tommy slept in his bed, his baseball glove on the nightstand, his parents' voices a soft hum downstairs. Sarah brewed coffee, her hand steadier, while David flipped pancakes, his smile fragile but real. "He's home," Sarah said, her eyes misty, the nightmare fading like a bad dream. The community center was a hive of chatter. Neighbors gathered, sharing coffee and donuts, their relief for Tommy tangled with anger at Victor Kane. "He prayed with us," one woman said, her voice shaking, a flyer with Tommy's photo crumpled in her hand. Others nodded, their trust in strangers dented. "Sheriff got him, though," a farmer added, his cap low. "Those cameras saved the day." Willow Creek's spirit held firm, its people ready to heal, their candles still burning for hope. Sheriff Linda Hayes worked through the morning, her station a fortress of evidence. Victor's burner phone, the ransom cash, and camera footage filled her desk, each piece a nail in his coffin. She'd interrogated him at dawn, his preacher act gone, his voice flat. "I needed a fresh start," he said, admitting to the kidnapping, the bank robberies, the parole jump. Linda's pen scratched, her face stone. "You picked the wrong town," she said, locking his file. He'd face court soon, charges stacking high. Kidnapping, extortion, fraud. Tommy woke to sunlight, his room a cocoon of familiar things. Posters, a worn mitt, a model plane. He padded downstairs, his wrists still pink but healing, his grin shy. "Pancakes?" he asked, sliding into a chair. Sarah hugged him, her laugh shaky. "All you can eat, kiddo." David ruffled his hair, his voice thick. "Told you, you're tough." They ate together, the kitchen warm, their laughter a bandage over the pain. Tommy talked about the nail, his small victory, and they listened, proud. Willow Creek's cameras were the talk of the town. Installed after petty thefts, Their lenses had caught Victor's every move: shack, mill, church. At the diner, folks praised Linda, their coffee cups raised. "She's our hero," one said, while others planned to fund more cameras, a shield for their quiet streets. St. Mary's stood silent, its doors locked, but the town vowed to find a new pastor, one worthy of its faith. Linda visited the Millers, her cruiser parked outside. Tommy met her at the door, his cap crooked. "Thanks, Sheriff," he said, his voice small but clear. Linda knelt, her smile soft. "You helped, Tommy. That nail was smart." She handed Sarah the ransom cash recovered from the church. "Every dollar's there?" Sarah's eyes welled, her voice a whisper. "We're so grateful." David shook Linda's hand, his grip firm. "Town's lucky to have you." Linda nodded, her job not done until Victor was sentenced. The town's healing began in small ways. Neighbors dropped off pies, their notes, scrawled with love. "For Tommy," one read, tied to a cherry cobbler. Kids from Tommy's team stopped by, tossing a ball in the yard, their laughter a melody. "You're back, man!" Nate shouted, high-fiving Tommy, who grinned, his swing rusty but eager. Sarah watched from the porch, her heart lighter, while David fired up the grill, the smell of burgers drawing smiles. Victor's cell was a gray box, his dreams of escape dead. He'd confessed to more, other scams, stolen identities. But Willow Creek was his downfall. Linda's team dug deeper, finding his old bank heist records, linking him to unsolved cases. "He's not slipping out," Tom said, sorting files. Linda nodded, her eyes on a photo of Tommy, his courage fueling her. She'd testify at the trial, her town's cameras her strongest witness, their truth unyielding. St. Mary's felt hollow, its pews empty, but the town didn't turn away. A meeting at the community center planned its future, a new pastor, youth programs, a fresh start. "This is our place," one said, lighting a candle. Tommy's story was a spark, urging folks to watch closer, trust smarter. They'd honor him with a plaque at the church, a quiet nod to a boy who fought back. The Millers leaned on each other. Sarah took Tommy to school, her hand on his shoulder, her smile brave. "You got this," she said, watching him join friends. His backpack bouncing. David reopened the store, its bell jingling, customers offering hugs. "He's a champ," one said, buying candy for Tommy. The family planned a quiet weekend, fishing, maybe, or a game, reclaiming normal step by step. Linda's work shifted to the trial. She met the prosecutor, a sharp woman from Bozeman, laying out the case. "Victor's got no defense," the prosecutor said, flipping through footage. Linda agreed, her mind on Willow Creek's scars. "We need this done right," she said, her voice firm. The town deserved justice, and she'd deliver, her badge a promise to Tommy and every kid in her care. Willow Creek's rhythm returned, softer but steady. The farmers' market reopened, stalls bright with apples and jam. Kids played in the park, their shouts echoing, while the diner hummed with talk of Tommy's return. "He's our miracle," one said, passing biscuits. The cameras watched on, their lenses a quiet guard, their role cemented in the town's story. Tommy, back at school, drew a picture, a boy with a nail, a church in the distance. "For you," he told Sarah, his grin wide. She framed it, hanging, it by the kitchen clock, a reminder of his strength. David planned a Little League party. Tommy's team invited, a chance to celebrate. "We're whole again," he said, kissing Sarah's cheek, their love a rock. Linda drove past St. Mary's, its silence a challenge. She'd help rebuild, ensure its light returned. Victor's trial loomed, his crimes laid bare, but Willow Creek was stronger, its people united. Tommy's courage, the camera's truth, and the town's heart had won, their story far from over. Summer's warmth returned to Willow Creek, the hills golden under a wide Montana sky. The town had weathered its storm, Tommy's rescue a beacon, Victor Kane's betrayal a scar fading with time. At the Miller's house, laughter spilled from The kitchen, where Tommy flipped pancakes, his baseball cap backward. Sarah stirred batter, her smile bright, while David set the table, his whistle a soft tune. "You're hogging the syrup," Tommy teased, nudging his dad, their bond stronger, forged in fire. The community center buzzed with plans. Neighbors met to revive St. Mary's, their voices hopeful. A new pastor chosen, a kind woman from Bozeman. Her sermons already drawing crowds. "This is our home," one said, pinning up a plaque for Tommy, its words simple. "For Courage, 2025. Flyers with his photo were gone, replaced by posters for a town fair, a chance to celebrate. Willow Creek's heart beat steady, its cameras still watching, a quiet promise of safety. Sheriff Linda Hayes tied up loose ends. Victor's trial held in Bozeman was swift, the evidence overwhelming. Camera footage, Tommy's testimony, and the ransom cash painted a clear picture. Linda took the stand, her voice firm, detailing Victor's crimes: kidnapping, extortion, fraud, and a string of past robberies. The judge's gavel fell. 20 years, no parole. "Justice served," Linda told reporters, her badge gleaming, her thoughts on Willow Creek's kids, safe again. Tommy thrived, his grin back in full force. At school, he aced math, his friends cheering, while Little League games filled weekends, his bat cracking home runs. "You're a star," Nate shouted, tossing him a ball. Sarah and David watched from the bleachers, their pickup parked nearby, their pride a warm glow. "He's our champ," Sarah said, her hand in David's, the shack a distant memory. Tommy's nail, now a keepsake, sat on his desk, a reminder of his fight. St. Mary's reopened, its pews full, the new pastor's voice a balm. Tommy lit a candle, not for Rusty this time, but for his town. "Thanks for watching," he whispered, his cap low, feeling Willow Creek's strength. Neighbors joined him, their prayers a chorus, the church's light restored. A youth group started, kids painting murals, their laughter echoing, a sign of healing. Linda's station hummed with routine, but Victor's case had changed her. She pushed for more cameras, training for her team, her mission clear. No kid would slip through again. "Tommy's why we do this," she told Tom, pinning a commendation on his desk. The town honored her at the fair, a plaque of her own, her smile rare but real. "Just doing my job," she said. But Willow Creek knew better, their sheriff a hero. The Millers rebuilt, their store thriving. Customers lingered, buying extra pies, their hugs a silent thank you. "Tommy's tough," one said, slipping him a candy bar. David and Sarah planned a fishing trip, the river calling, a chance to make new memories. "We're whole," David said, grilling burgers. Tommy's laughter, the sweetest sound. Sarah framed Tommy's drawing, the boy with the nail, its place by the clock a daily vow to stay close. Willow Creek's fair was a triumph. Stalls lined Main Street, offering cotton candy and quilts, kids racing through games. Tommy and Nate manned a dunk tank soaking the mare, their grins wide. Sarah sold pies, David flipped hot dogs, their store's banner flapping. Linda patrolled, her cruiser slow, waving to folks. "This is us," one said, raising a lemonade. The town's spirit unbroken, its cameras a quiet guard. Victor's name faded, his cell a footnote. He'd tried pleading, but the footage, Willow Creek's unblinking eyes, silenced him. Linda visited Bozeman's prison once, her report final. "He's done," she told the Millers, closing the case. Sarah hugged her, tears falling. "You gave us our boy." Tommy nodded, his voice soft. "Thanks, Sheriff." Linda smiled, her job a calling, her town, her family. The fair ended with fireworks, their colors bursting over the hills. Tommy leaned on Sarah, his cap tilted, watching sparks fade. "I'm okay now," he said, his voice sure. David ruffled his hair, his arm around Sarah. "We all are." Neighbors clapped, their cheers a song. Willow Creek's heart full. "Such Boschquag," Mary's glowed in the distance, its steeple tall, a symbol of faith reborn. Months passed, the town settling into peace. Tommy played ball, his swing sharp, his dreams big. The Millers hosted a barbecue, neighbors filling their yard, laughter rising. Linda stopped by, her uniform off, a rare day free. "You're stuck with us," Sarah teased, passing her a plate. Linda laughed, her guard down, Willow Creek's warmth her reward. Under a starry sky, the Millers sat on their porch, Tommy between them, his glove in his lap. "We made it," Sarah said, her voice soft, the town's lights twinkling. David nodded, his hand on Tommy's shoulder. Together. Willow Creek stood strong, its cameras silent sentinels, its people a family, their story one of courage, truth, and home. Wow, what a ride. Tommy's courage and Willow Creek's heart stole. The show, in The Kidnapped Boy and the False Preacher. What was your favorite moment? That fair scene had us smiling. Drop your thoughts in the comments and share this story with someone who loves a tale of triumph. Hit that like button if you're cheering for Tommy, and subscribe with the bell to catch more stories that warm your soul. Thanks for watching, friends. See you next time.